China, the Middle Kingdom. This is a country that moves like it's thinking in decades. Mega cities rising out of nowhere, high-speed rail cutting across provinces like it's nothing, entire industries built, scaled, and optimized at a speed most countries can't even process. You walk through places like Shanghai or Shenzhen and it feels less like a city growing and more like a system upgrading itself in real time. And what makes it more interesting is the mix. Ancient philosophy sitting right next to cutting-edge tech, Confucian ideas about order in society still echoing in a place that's also pushing AI, robotics, and digital finance harder than almost anywhere else. Who wouldn't want to pack a suitcase and move to China? It seems like heaven on earth. In 1978, China was poor. Most people lived in the countryside. Incomes were low, and the country was largely cut off from the global economy. After decades of communist central planning under Mao Zedong, China was struggling to feed its population and industrial productivity was weak. Then everything changed. When Deng Xiaoping, hope I pronounced that correctly, when he came to power, he introduced a simple but revolutionary idea. China could remain politically communist while embracing parts of the free market. Farmers were allowed to sell surplus crops for profit, private businesses were gradually legalized, and foreign companies were invited to invest in China. Special economic zones such as Shenzhen became laboratories for capitalism. The timing was perfect. Western companies were looking for cheap manufacturing. China had hundreds of millions of workers willing to leave rural villages for factory jobs. So global businesses rushed in, building factories that produced everything from shoes to smartphones. For decades, China became the factory of the world. The government then reinvested the country's growing wealth into infrastructure, building highways, ports, railways, power plants, and entire cities. Education improved, exports exploded, and hundreds of millions of people moved into the middle class. The results were staggering. Since the reforms began, more than 800 million people have been lifted out of extreme poverty, making it one of the greatest poverty reduction stories in history. China grew from an isolated poor country into the world's second largest economy and a global manufacturing powerhouse. In less than half a century, China went from a country associated with poverty and famine to a nation that competes with the USA for global influence. China paints itself as the most technologically and economically advanced nation in the world. The United States paints China as a threat to world peace and civilization itself. The truth is, both perspectives are not accurate. Although China has achieved a great deal over the past few decades, it also has faced significant trade-offs. For example, the Chinese government under the CCP has generally prioritized stability and economic growth over political freedoms. There are limits on opposition parties, public dissent, and independent media. While China became richer, not everyone benefited equally. Coastal cities such as Shanghai and Shenzhen became wealthy, while some rural regions lagged behind. A country that once preached equality developed significant wealth gaps. For decades, rapid industrialization produced severe air, water, and soil pollution. China has since reinvested heavily in clean energy, but much of its early growth was fueled by environmental sacrifice. China has built one of the world's most sophisticated state surveillance systems using cameras, digital monitoring, and internet controls. Supporters argue it limits privacy and personal freedom. To be honest, China built the first ever surveillance state. China has the largest population in the world, but if nothing changes, that same population will be filled with old people. No offense to old people. For years, growth in China was driven partly by construction and real estate. When major developers such as the Evergrande Group ran into trouble, concerns emerged about debt levels and whether some of China's growth had been artificially boosted by excessive building. The truth is, China's rise was built on a bargain: rapid economic development in exchange for tighter political control. And old people. I love old people, I promise. The US treats China as if it's an unstoppable rival, but China's economy is slowing, its population is shrinking, and it faces major structural challenges. China is a formidable power, but not necessarily the existential threat some politicians portray it as. But hey, if you want the government to give you permission to spy, build data centers, and weapons of mass destruction, you need to portray China as a nation that seeks to undermine and ultimately dismantle the foundations of modern civilization.